Hello, we've come to the next in our series, Genesis, the first 3 chapters, and we've reached that point straight after the creation of humanity when humankind are given tasks to perform, godlike tasks. I'm going to read from Genesis chapter 1 and verse 28. God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful and increase in number. Fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air, and over every living creature that moves on the ground." So humanity is given the task of creating and ruling. These are godlike activities. Be fruitful and increase in number was the instruction. In other words, procreate. Create on behalf of. That's what the prefix pro means, on behalf of. We'll all have watched nature programs, both of human development and of animal development. And in these, we learn or are reminded of the fact that a sperm fertilizes an egg and an embryo develops into a fetus, and eventually a child or an animal, if it's in the animal kingdom, is born. And when that happens, we are familiar with the scientific explanation of reproduction. But whenever any young couple holds their newly born baby in arms, they still look down adoringly and says, "That's my little miracle." It's not that they're unfamiliar with the scientific explanation of procreation, but they recognise in that moment the great miracle of birth. Now, if we grow flowers or vegetables in our gardens or in fields, or if we manage forests or livestock or fish stocks, or if we are engaged in harnessing natural resources or control the damaging effects of natural disasters, then in all those instances and many more, we are acting as stewards in God's world. We're looking after that which is His. Now, Jesus used this same scenario in various parables he told to express teaching on different issues entirely. So, for instance, in the parable of the wheat and the weeds, he used a scenario where people went to the owner and besought him to exercise harvesting now to save a crop from being spoiled by weeds. In another parable, he addressed the issue of the tenants in the vineyard, people who are accountable to the owner for what they do with the vineyard. In another parable, he looked at the parable of the talents. And again, all these are using the notion that we are accountable to another, an owner, a manager, etc. So this raises a number of questions. If, for instance, we are to engage in divine qualities of procreation and management, is there not a danger that we could be found guilty of abusing that right? And our critics might say, what about population control? What about abusing the animals and the rest of the resources of the earth? Well, such a criticism, frankly, is ignorant because it bears no recognition of the fact that we carry out these duties responsibly and under the authority of God. Christians must exercise their duties as co-creators and managers or stewards under an accountability to God, and not as free and selfish agents. The two issues of populating the earth and resources are, of course, connected. There is a limit to how many people can populate this earth without impacting the limited resources that are available to them. We are not commissioned to create, rule, etc., but we are commissioned to create and rule responsibly and in full recognition that we serve under the authority of God. We are under managers. We are under stewards of God's world, not ours. When Jesus had an engagement with a lawyer, the lawyer asked him, "Who is my neighbour?" And in response to that, Jesus told the story of the Good Samaritan in Luke's Gospel, chapter 10. And at the end of that conversation, Jesus made the point, you are to be neighbourly. Don't just seek to divide humanity as to who is and who isn't my neighbour, but be neighbourly. Now, if we are to love our neighbour, then we will exercise our role of procreation and of management in recognition that we also have an obligation to God, but to other people too. The Canadian thinker Marshall McLuhan spoke of this globe as a global village. So we are stewards answerable to God, and we conduct our duties as stewards in loving service to our neighbours, and in this global village, everyone is our neighbour. Now, after the creation of humanity, this is God's first mandate, and it sets the course for our place and our general commission in his world. Now, our points for reflection or discussion today are as follows. In what practical ways are we acting as responsible stewards in God's world? And how might you improve your performance? Indeed, how might I improve my performance in this area of discipleship? Well, thank you for watching, and look out for further talks in the series Genesis, the first 3 chapters.